I'll make a motion when we have a quorum, it's just.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, one vote.
Good? I make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? We have some time set aside for public input, so if anybody would like to come forward and bring up any issues that they think would like to. Otherwise, Mike can't talk with us until for another 15 minutes, we may discuss some other things. Any public input? All right, any old items from the last meeting? We're going to talk to Mike Sotak here shortly about several things. Any old items that anybody wants to bring up or talk about?
Been any changes to people that live around the lake and always do their character? Water quality.
How's the lake looking?
Oh, I could see the bottom of my wall. Not this rain last night, but the previous rain. At least where there was a noticeable difference in water. I couldn't see any green algae in there.
Our testing is showing the same thing. We dropped in our ortho numbers were below 50. And that's pretty much, it looks like it's been dropping for about 2 weeks.
Turn on their mics and use the mics when you speak, that'd be great.
Is there any explanation for why that might be going on?
I have no idea.
The bloom helps use up a lot of the nutrients. Lack of activity on the lake, bring it up, probably had a lot. We're still in public, take some public input if anybody's interested. You guys just walked in, if you wanted to say anything. It's good to hear the lakes and looking pretty nice. I was out there on the 4th, and it looked pretty good, and I talked to quite a few people that said it's in a lot better shape, so. Let's go to our second agenda item, if everybody's all right with that. We'll skip number 1 and get Mike on the phone here shortly. And we have an event coming up on the 30th of July, just kind of a public awareness event. People out to the lake, kind of just have a good conversation about what we're doing and what our goals are, to try to help clean up the lake. We're in search of some good, booths, more or less. What sort of things might interest people. So if you look in your packet, we have the data has to be filled in for our situation, but these are both coming from FIRA. They'll put these together for us to show people how the funding, would work with federal, state, and local dollars, and also where our phosphorus reductions need to come. So it identifies where we're having some issues and where we need to work on fixing some problems. But we're also looking at for ideas for more hands-on type stuff for the event. So if anybody has anything. There's 2 things we just discussed before the meeting started. I spoke with the Game and Fish, and in the past they've done a trailer where that's a fish tank, and they'll bring all sorts of fish. And they don't do that anymore. What they do is they just have a few aquariums set up where kids can touch frogs and put some turtles in there and stuff that they can see. So I think that's probably a good idea, just to show some of the things that are living around the lake. So I'll do that. I'm planning on helping with that. And then we're also going to have a water quality kind of testing station, show residents what we're looking for, how to test water. If they want to come and help, give them the time and dates that we're doing this stuff. That's a goal to have. Those are two ideas. So if anybody else has anything, we're coming, let's see, we got 2 weeks to go, so roughly.
What do we need in terms of food? Are we going to have anything that the Parks Department needs to prepare for? Or did we have someone talk to one of the local grocery
I
stores?
don't know if anybody reached out to, I don't believe it, not that I've heard of. But we can,
Stephanie, did you have anything?
What's that?
For the food for the event?
I did not hear back from either one, so I did send an email to Justin Luther yesterday to see if he got the message.
okay, so if that falls through, then we'll just either, well, in the Parks Department, is that within your budget to do something like that for an event, or
Yeah, we can look into it some more and we'll find some
Okay.
funds for it.
figure it out?
How about a booth explaining the warning system and the signs and so forth? Would that be something we could put together? Or
Great idea.
somebody else can work with you on that or certainly help?
Steve, are you going to be there? You want to have that up? Is that correct?
We have somebody to talk about conservation.
12 to 2:30. And reach out to the NRCS office and see if we can get a couple people there. Okay. Rainfall simulator?
Jeff retired, was
Yeah.
part of my problem.
Well, he kind of spearheaded that whole thing.
Right, yeah. I'm trying to find somebody else.
Okay. I could probably run it. I've seen it enough.
And maybe Pheasants Forever, I know we talked about that, they would probably be a bad group to contact.
Yeah, I'll reach out to them. They're in that office too. I'm not sure. He had a late, couldn't make it today, so I'll reach out to him. He'd mentioned something last meeting. I don't remember. Yep. Well, if anybody else comes up with any other ideas, we're more the better.
Was Myra gonna be there?
I don't believe so, but that's a good.
Do they provide information to, maybe something to show what they've done in the past and some successes they've had?
Okay, we can talk to Mike when he gets on the phone about that. Any other ideas, or if something comes up, just shoot the committees an email if you have something. We'll just try to make it work. It's going to be pretty low key. I mean, we're just going to try to just have good conversations and talk about what we're doing, I think is the main goal. And try to get people there, so.
How are we advertising?
We were going to try to lock down some information from one of the federal agencies to send a mailing out. I don't know if we've got that yet. But probably in the daily, should probably get that going.
Will any of the radio stations pick it up?
Yeah.
Public information.
We'll work on that this week and we get some information out.
A little thing together for that. What else are we forgetting?
Do any radio stations want to do a on-air
Live.
interview with you at the event?
Live broadcast?
Yeah, like a live broadcast. Might want to ask them.
Any other?
I think that about covers the event.
Okay, food, people that, get people there and have something to talk about, so. Yeah. The city could too, I suspect, put it on your.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Let's move on to number 3, water.
Just get an idea of how many are coming to that event?
Oh, yeah, who here would be able to come and help out, and I'll be there. Yeah.
I will be at my son's wedding that weekend, so.
It's all right, we'll let you off this time. Can we get a water quality sampling update? How did it go last time?
We went out to 3 different places, West End Bridge, about where we went out to West End Bridge by there, and by Camp Royal, and then by Public Beach. Everybody was out there. And everything actually, like the dissolved oxygen, which is pretty critical for living organisms, that was good. We did see it drop down when we took samples near the bottom, but we expected that. It's pretty calm now. Nitrate levels were fine. Phosphorus levels were off the charts. So one of the readings, it topped out, that was by the West End Bridge. It's higher than what the.
Is your light on?
The phosphate levels were high.
There you go.
Okay, the phosphate levels were high. Highest was by the West End Bridge. The clarity was, let me see here. Well, we did temperature and there was no stratification evident. And that was, the deepest was 5 meters. So, oh, and then I did do a simple fecal coliform and there was none in any of the sites. There's coliform, but there was no fecal coliform.
You said the phosphate levels was high at the West End Bridge?
Well, yeah, the phosphate, let's see. Okay, yeah, it was, it topped out at the West End for the surface phosphates. And then by Camp Arroyo, it was about half that, it was 0.5. And then by Public Beach, Powell Point, that was 0.4 parts per million.
For the flow on tire steel?
I don't know, without testing. I mean, that's the pattern, but.
Can we turn on the microphones, just make sure everyone can hear?
And then when we took the bottom samples, it was, it really wasn't much difference. It still was high though, for the bottom water samples. So.
Thank you for doing that. We're going to try to get out again in 2 weeks, right before the event. And then at the event, we'll have probably all the same gear to do some more of it if people want to. So Any other updates on that? Good. How about the grant for the watershed coordinator position?
I don't have good news. Well, sort of have good news and bad news. So the grant itself did not get funded, and I don't know, have you gotten a letter yet? No, okay. I was told they were going out, but anyways, I can tell you that it did not get funded. However, and Mike, I was going to talk with you afterwards. I was going to see if PF's match was still good. I have somebody else that will match with it, and we can go another route.
I suspect we can talk them into, I mean, they're in, so.
Right.
I mean, as long as we get somebody on the ground, I think they're probably interested, so.
Yep. So I think we have some options.
Okay.
That we can still make that happen. I found somebody else. So I think we can still make it happen.
Good. Well, thank you for
So, I just
not
wanna
giving up on it.
I just want to confirm with PF and make sure that, because that's the only way it's going to work.
Sure.
We need some kind of, somebody to throw a few dollars in with them.
All right, well, good. Well, we'll talk after and we'll try to.
Yeah. They give you an explanation of why.
Mostly it's just a lack of funding and there was a ranking system and just where it fell out, I don't, yeah. We had $7.5 million worth of requests and only a little over $2 million worth of funding, so it was just strictly kind of a supply and demand.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, in
Right.
case for next time, there's things that we can do to prevent that again.
Sure. I'd have to go back and look at the comments. I don't have that with me. I can certainly get that for you guys.
That'd be great. All right. Let's get Mike Sotak on the phone here. Mike, it's Mike and the whole gang here. A bunch of us.
How are you, Mike?
I'm good, and you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
I am actually got delayed a little bit this morning, so I planned on being in my office already when this call came. I'm still about 45 minutes away, so I'll be working from my hands-free on my phone. So I'll listen in, and when you ask me a question, give me a second, because I'm going to mute my phone between me talking, because it's kind of sensitive. It kind of makes it bad for you. So I'll mute it in between, but whenever, I'll just listen in, and whenever you answer me a question, just give me a few seconds, take my phone off mute, and I'll be back on in a second.
We've covered a few things already in the meeting, so I think we're to the
Okay.
point. We're to the point where we're going to just kind of ask you probably 4 or 5 questions, and then we'll see
You bet.
what else comes up. So.
Great.
So one of the first questions we had was if you could give some quick bullet points on what sort of information we're going to be able to gain from this first phase and how we're going to be able to use it, that would just kind of clear some things up and some questions for a lot of people. So if you could just give us some ideas of what it is going to tell us.
You bet.
Also, Mike.
You bet. Let me. Yep.
Mike, also just the model, what that would look like as well.
Yep. You bet. I'll kind of work that. So I'm coming through okay to everybody there?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what we want to attempt with this first phase is what we want to do is we're building this nutrient max balance model. So this model is being built inside another program called GoldSim, which simulates different scenarios for design and incorporates stochastics into the design. And so the purpose of the model is to, A, build a baseline situation for the reservoir that basically says, based on what we know about the reservoir in terms of observations, different water quality parameters like phosphorus and clarity and things like that, we built a model that basically says, here's how the water's moving in and out of the reservoir, taking into account rainfall, watershed runoff, etc. And then what goes out of the reservoir in terms of village, seepage, etc. And then once we get the model a baseline situation, then we can run future scenarios for ways of reducing nutrients to see how will that affect the lake. And more importantly, how does that affect the lake response from really two primary categories, one being nutrients, which generate algae and other toxins, and then also clarity in the reservoir. And so the goal is to find solutions that match or attempt to approach the goals set by the WAC and the TAT committee through the community-based planning process. So specifically through this phase, what we're going to do for deliverables is we're going to have a working model that we can check scenarios with. So what we said we were going to do is that we were going to come up with 4 or 5 scenarios that give us an idea of how much is it going to cost to get us to the point where we have a reservoir where hopefully it matches, goals, water clarity goals set forth during this process. And so the other thing we're going to do is in developing those, both in-lake and watershed-based management practices, is by developing those, we're going to get a better idea of who are potential partners in the project. And that's why NRCS, Ducks Unlimited, et cetera, are on board, is we can identify partners and funding programs that can hopefully help us achieve our goals. So at the end of this phase, the deliverable is going to be a working baseline model and a report that basically reports the working baseline model and the alternatives, some of the alternatives that have been run through it, along with recommendations for next steps. And an idea of, still big, high-level costs of, what does this cost? Does this cost $2 million, $20 million? That's what we've been saying is we need to hone in on what's the cost as it relates to the alternatives that meet our goals.
Sounds good. Any questions?
So that'll. Go ahead.
Any questions on what Mike just said?
Yeah, is there any correlation between what other states are doing and what we're trying to do in South Dakota, and particularly Lake Mitchell?
Can you hear that, Mike, or you?
It was muffled.
Okay.
What I heard was something about, is there any examples of other states doing something similar?
That's it. Is there any
Yeah,
correlation?
is there any similar programs in any other of the states? I know Minnesota's really quite active. And some of the feds are quite active on what you can discharge into their so-called creeks and lakes.
If you just give examples of what some other states are doing, and if is there any correlation to what our project is, and if there's anything similar going on in Minnesota, Iowa, anywhere around us.
True.
Yeah, so Minnesota, I always tell people in Nebraska, we've got lake projects going on besides your project in South Dakota. We got about 4 active projects in Iowa and about 3 active projects in Nebraska. And I always tell people in Nebraska and Iowa, until you get into really northern Iowa, comparing ourselves to Minnesota doesn't get you a whole lot. You might as well compare us to Hawaii. They have a totally different situation up there with their lakes and how they protect them and just the natural status of the lake. So I'm going to correlate correlate your project to instead reservoir projects, which we have going on in Iowa and Nebraska, which deal with, different levels of inflow. We've talked about how this lake is extremely different due to the watershed to lake ratio size. So the goal is still the same at a different scale for every project that we deal with, because we're really trying to reduce nutrient inflow to the lake. So in each case, we look for opportunities in the watershed and in the lake to reduce nutrients to try to meet water quality goals for the lake. So this is going to be, so this will be, you're not going to find very many projects like this in the country because of the challenge ahead of us due to that watershed to lake ratio size. I think we've made that very clear through the public presentations. This is very unique. That doesn't mean it's insurmountable. It just means it's unique. But in other states, we've got plenty of examples where we're using local and federal resources as well as partnering with local and other federal agencies. And the difference is resources, let's say like the 319 money. So the EPA Section 319 money can be used to help clean up reservoirs. But EPA isn't necessarily a partner. Local partners, I would say like NRCS, where we partner with them to target watershed-based approaches. NRCS and Ducks Unlimited are two of the entities that have been involved in the project so far, where we've been able to partner with those entities to use their programs to help us achieve goals that are actually mutual goals. So NRCS's interest is in the watershed to help protect soil conservation practices in the watershed. Well, that also helps the lake. So we're going to look for a combination of funding programs and funding partners to try to put together a project that meets common goals for everybody. So every project is like that. So I can tell you about every lake that we're working on where to some degree that's happening. But the mix of partners and what exactly they're doing on each lake is a little bit different.
Mike, I've got another question for you, two-part question. There's a lot of questions on the timeline. Could you give us the overall timeline of this model nutrient system? And also,
you bet.
And then secondly, the data that we're collecting now is in a very dry year, kind of an unusual situation. What are you doing to go back and incorporate other data from previous years?
So the data for this year, so let's first talk. I'm going to answer the second question first and come back to the first one. So the second question about the model and what we're doing. So as we move forward, the model will always take on new information, and the model becomes better with new information. And what you'll see over time is that, let's just say 3 years from now, if you keep feeding data into the model, you're going to see the model reduce uncertainty because we're going to have better answers to correlate the input into the model and make everything jive with lake response compared to model assumption of lake inputs and outputs. So in terms of this year, we're collecting more data, better data, but we do have some past data and some other information to go off. So because that was more sporadic in the past, the more input we feed into the model, the better it is. A model's still going to give us an answer no matter what. That answer, of course, is going to be based on the value of the data we have that creates the baseline for the model compared to what we put in for, hey, let's assume we're doing this project and this project's going to reduce nutrients this much. It's going to take that many out of the system. The model then predicts how does that affect the lake. So one of the things we've talked about is the fact that we have such a long way to go to reduce nutrients is that, let's just say you do one little thing like, the wetlands, the floating wetlands has been something that's been brought up. The floating wetlands is going to have a positive effect on the lake. The floating wetlands are not going to have any chance of having any noticeable effect on the lake. Because if you reduce the nutrient concentration in the lake today, 5% even, which those really probably wouldn't do, you will see no noticeable difference in the lake. step towards where we need to get in terms of the ultimate goal to get it where you can see visual responses. So that's the status of the model. So we know we have several years ahead of us no matter what the plan is. We're going to keep feeding the model data, and the model's going to get better and better each time. So this year, being a dry year, is good because it gives us kind of an extreme situation and we know how the lake reacted. So it doesn't really matter so much if it's a dry year, a wet year, whatever. All the data is good data. Otherwise, what we don't have for historical data, we replace with average data. So even though we didn't collect data in the past, I can go back and get rainfall. I can use gauge data to get runoff from the watershed. I can do things empirically instead of incorporating real data to reproduce to the best ability we can based on available data what happened in the past. So that's the answer to number two. The answer to number one in terms of timeline is that we want to finish this season out, through harvest, really, with the collection of data. In the meantime, we've got the model to the point now where we're getting close to be able to start setting up scenarios to run through them. And like I said, I'm going to get an answer today on any scenario I write. The answer isn't going to be as good today as it is going to be 3 months from now. And so the goal, we really wanted to have this season to collect data. So during this season, we want to do that. At the end of the fall here, right about the end of harvest time, because we want to have producers in the watershed participate, we'll want to set up that big, last public meeting for this phase one at the end of the harvest season, where we've got about the best, first season of data we can collect. We can run our scenarios through the model. We have as clear of a picture of an answer as we can possibly get for year one in terms of going back to the questions I talked about before. What are the alternatives that are available for us to meet nutrient reduction goals? And so the idea will be, at the end of this phase, is to say, have the public meeting and get people thinking about what's supportable from a community and what's supportable from a building a project financial standpoint to get to the point where we can start identifying, here's a potential project for us that is A, affordable, and B, supportable by the community. And so, Mike, you sent me an email earlier today, and I'm going to answer that, the question in there now about what should be expected of phase two and how much will it cost. So phase two is going to be, hopefully we get to the point where we can find an affordable project with a combination of partners and funding opportunities, to then go out and say, okay, what does it take to make those applications? What do we have to do to apply to a program from 319, from NRCS, from St. James River Authority, from Ducks Unlimited? How do we package that all together? All of those different entities are going to require some background in terms of funding applications. And those are really going to define what's phase two. What would, in a perfect world, we can build a single watershed management plan that includes watershed management and inlet-based goals to get up to the point where we have one plan that acts as a application for all of those agencies. That would be phase two. What that costs, we don't know, because we don't know what the project is and we don't know who the funding partners are. Watershed management plans are typically, we've been involved in watershed management plans that are anywhere from $100,000 to $400,000. The good news is that sometimes there's money, sometimes there's money available to actually participate in the preparation of those plans. And so that's another thing that will factor into what's phase two.
No end, people, and dollars. That's the solution. There's no end to the.
Okay, I didn't hear. I'm not sure if you're talking to me, but I didn't hear that.
And
Would you
there's
go
no
over-
end to funding. It's forever. You're working with a project that took 100 years to accumulate enough to get people excited. That's how old the dam is.
could you go over some of the, are there any questions on Mike's second, kind of where we're at with the model? And then could you go over some of the low-hanging fruit that the community could still be actively involved in and things that we can still do here to keep things moving and
You bet. So one of the things we talked about during the last WAC and TAT meeting was the fact that usually these committees get formed right about the time you have your first public meeting. Now, we already had a public meeting from the standpoint of the city helping to justify entering into the study, but that really wasn't intended to be the kickoff for the first community-based process meeting. The first community-based planning meeting is usually where you define your problems and talk about some alternatives, and then you start working on those, and that's usually what the WAC and the TAT do. So we formed these two groups a little bit early, but, talking to the mayor and talking to Nathan, they felt it was necessary to keep momentum in the community, et cetera, and that's great. So I don't have a long laundry list of items to give you to say, here's what we can be doing now. So what we can be doing now is position, et cetera. Those are definitely part out there. NRCS Ducks Unlimited have programs. So I've talked to the technical committee to say, hey, look, we've already given you at least based upon a very quick and dirty sparrow analysis, here's where some hot spots are in the watershed to be focusing any land management practices that are available and any funding programs that are available. So that's a lot of what that watershed coordinator would normally do. If you want to take any proactive steps of getting that ahead of and going out ahead of having a watershed coordinator to try to get people in the watershed to look at those programs. But other than that, education in the community about what's going on and what's coming is really, I think, the number one goal of the WAC committee and the technical advisory committee, technical advisory team would be, I would say, the best low-hanging fruit for now is to get out and start doing anything in the watershed. Anything we do is going to be a help. There's so much to do. It doesn't make sense to say, well, there's nothing to do now because we don't know the plan. Whatever the plan is, improving land management practices in the watershed is going to be a huge benefit, no matter what the plan is. And it should be a never-ending, and it really always is a never-ending in every watershed, a never-ending goal is to keep improving what's happening there. And so, education in the community, I think, should be the number one primary focus of the WAC. The TAT, looking at the possibility for watershed management practices being implemented for now. And until we have a specific plan where we're drawing on the WAC and the TAT to help complete funding applications and continue to gather data, et cetera, what we really need to do is get our work done here over the next several months. And then we're going to have a more refined, focused goal. So I don't want you to feel like you're doing nothing or there's nothing to do. It's just, we're just a little bit ahead of the game with these committees on this particular project, given where the technical part of the project is.
We have an event scheduled for the 30th of July, an education event, so I think that's a pretty good start to getting public awareness out there and what we have planned and what we're doing. I saw the two sheets that you had sent on the phosphorus reductions and the project funding levels. How much information of this will you be providing? And, I mean, what do you need from us, I guess, so we can get these basically for Lake Mitchell, or what kind of stuff do you want from us?
So last month when we talked about these, I think it was the WAC committee that talked about two visuals they'd like to see, and those are the two visuals they asked for. In the meantime, I thought that a third visual would be good, which is defining the overall process of the project. So Mayor Toomey yesterday emailed me a question about, where is this at on the 7 steps, et cetera. And so I think creating another board that helps you tell the story of, hey, here's where we're at. We want to make sure you know where we're at and where we're going. So I guess what I was hoping, Mike, is that first, based upon the direction I was given last month, to these two boards, before I got into the specifics of changing these two boards for Lake Mitchell, do they look like they're attempting to start telling the story of what we want to tell as that? And maybe the best way to answer that question is to say, let's lay out the primary goals for this public meeting on the 30th, or this outreach meeting, whatever we call the forum. Let's lay out the primary goals of the message that we want to deliver, and then let's make sure the visual helps support the message. And so what I would say is, give me some written feedback on if you think that these help. I'm going to develop a third board that talks about the overall process. And so you can say, here's where we're at today, and here's what we have ahead of us. That helps to answer some of the questions that we already talked about on today's call. And I will help develop the talking points and what I call the 30 or the 45-second elevator speech for each of you to give for each board. And so if you guys are comfortable with that, what I would say is, give me some ideas of what, if you think there's something else besides the funding, the goal of the nutrient reduction and the multiple things that are going to happen to achieve our goals, and then the overall project kind of flowchart process and where we're at today. If you think there's another message, that's a lot for the public. I think those three. But if there's another message you have, be happy to develop something. But if you say, we want to develop a message to tell the public how much it's going to cost, I'm not going to be able to help at this point.
Could I make a suggestion? I know that the public is sometimes very visual. Maybe if we had like a flow chart with friendly words, good plain English words without the science so much, to show them how the process goes, like a block for filling in the model, a block for the inputs from the model telling us which things to do, just so that the 7 steps works for us, but if you had something that was quick and easy to visualize, like a flow chart, it might be easier for the public.
The only consistent word I heard in that was flow chart, and I assume we're talking about kind of the project process, and that's that third visual that I was talking about that I'll start developing it. Mike, could you relay anything else that was just said there? That you're the only one I really hear perfectly clear. Could you relay anything else that was asked?
Well, we just want a nice, clear visual that is understandable by all, that can really get behind and grasp what we're really trying to do. We'll email you some ideas. We'll put some things together and get that out to you soon.
Just focusing on 3 things and so I don't need to answer this second, but something to think about in your feedback is, in this public meeting, we focused on 3 things. Number 1, what's the overall project process that I'll develop something of a flow chart for. Number 2, how is the funding going to work, which is what one of the visuals I already sent you is intended to begin to tell. And the story that goes with it will help a little bit more. And then number 3, ultimately, what does the project look like, which is what we want to tell them, that there's no one smoking gun here. This thing's going to be a combination of several things. And so I'll tailor those 2 visuals I already sent you and another one for Lake Mitchell if everybody agrees that those 3 kind of overreaching subjects, collectively make a good message for this meeting on the 30th. And so if you want to think about that and give me some feedback on those 3 things, then I think we can continue to work. And if you want, since the public meeting is going to come before the next Black TAT meeting, I think it also makes sense for you all to say, here's who we want you working for, and if you have other committees that want to be involved in helping to refine these visuals, refine the message, happy to keep them in the loop, or just say, work through Mike and Nathan or whatever however that works for you. But if you could all decide today how you want to do that and who wants to be involved, then provide me feedback on that as an idea, and we'll kind of move forward from there over the next several weeks.
Sounds good. Any other questions for Mike? I think I pretty much.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you.
Go ahead.
Mike, this is Kevin Thurman with the City of Mitchell. Lakes and reservoirs, pretty much all different. the scale of what you're doing with erosion changes, but which recommendation would you have for the most impact on Lake Mitchell, so we as a committee would know where our eventual goal is? So, you know, the lake is obviously in a problem stage that needs the biggest impact as soon as we can. You know, there's basically 10 or 12 principles for cleaning up a watershed, and since this isn't your first dance, which one of your recommendations in the projects that you've completed have had the biggest impact on water quality?
Well, I didn't want to interrupt, but I heard about 20% of that. I'm sorry, the connection from anybody other than Mike has just been kind of unrecognizable. That was a long question. I just didn't want to interrupt. I apologize. Mike, could you rephrase the best you can?
Let's see. There you go. I couldn't do it here, plus justice.
What things are the biggest bang for buck?
Mike, which one of your recommendations on your projects, you've obviously got extensive experience, has the most impact? Even though the lake scales change from lake to lake, the principles stay the same as far as erosion, shore stabilization, biomass control. Which recommendation has the biggest impact on your project, so we as a committee know where we're headed to make the most impact on our lake as soon as possible?
So that's a very good question, and a difficult one to answer. Is that you kind of gave my answer in the first part of your statement, and that's that given that every lake is different. So at Carter Lake, because Carter Lake is an oxbow and it isn't a reservoir, you know, the alum application by far had the biggest impact. And on any natural lake, an alum application in terms of nutrient reduction is going to be the fastest, the quickest way to achieve nutrient reduction goals. The problem for your project is that alum is not going to be a great solution in your project because of the large watershed to lake ratio and the turnover in the lake. So, you know, the answer really is different every single time. Sometimes it's dredging. Sometimes it's alum application. Sometimes it's upstream dams. Sometimes it's, I mean, we've done probably 20 or 30 of these, and I don't know that I can tell you other than the big scale, you know, if you look at that visual I showed you all before about the beaker at Carter Lake and how collectively achieve those goals, nothing's going to knock down nutrients like alum. Your project, though, that may be a small part of the solution, but it's going to be working towards a multi-phase project. In my opinion, you know, the best way to achieve your goals, the easiest way, is going to be large-scale upstream impoundments or segmenting the reservoir so that there's different uses and or expectations of water quality goals for the different parts of it. Just by the nature of how much water comes in, the chance of getting that much work done in the watershed to achieve your goal and you all seeing the results in your lifetime is just a far-fetched possibility. It's just it takes so long to get enough practices in to give us the nutrient reduction goals we want. And that was really why we as a firm targeted Lake Mitchell as a project in South Dakota, because in my opinion, in South Dakota, there's some real genius in attacking the problem at the source. The problem is, by doing that over and over and not using in-lake solutions, you don't get lake results in any short period of time or even in your lifetime. And that's the question we ask everybody is, do you want to see results in your lifetime? And the people that live on the lake definitely want to. And so it's going to take some bigger scale management practices to achieve those. And so, you know, what those are and how those work, that's going to be the tough part to figure out. upstream reservoirs. We've got another couple crazy ideas I really don't want to throw on the table yet because I don't want you all thinking I'm a loon. But there's, you know, we're already thinking about it for sure. And what those are, you know, we hope to get to what some of those could be in the, you know, in the coming month. Well, we're definitely all going to have to think outside the box in terms of what it takes just because of the unique nature of this project.
Any other questions for Mike before we let him go? Question. Here, you better. Oh, okay. You better hop over here.
Hey, Mike. Hey there?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, this is Justin, and I live on the lake. When I started this committee, the model and the prices, you know, I was told we were going to have like an August deadline. And it, you know, we keep bouncing around. Now you're saying after harvest. Can we narrow that down to a date, a week?
We certainly can if you want to. I mean, you know, we didn't get started on some of the data collection we'd like to have. We just got the lake level designer put in last week. We can give you an answer whenever you want, really, within a certain time frame. Unfortunately, you know, as we started sorting through some of the data, it just wasn't quite as good as we had hoped. And there wasn't as much as we had hoped in order to come up with a realistic answer. So, you know, we could firm something up early fall if you want. But I think the best thing to do is for us to be able to hold a meeting that kind of wraps up this phase. Normally, shoot for after harvest because then we can get people in the watershed involved, which is going to be a big plus for this project. So, yeah, it might be a little after some of the, you know, early months that we talked about, but a couple months to collect more data, in our opinion, is going to be worthwhile in terms of refining the answer.
Okay. I just don't want harvest to come and go, and then we're waiting until spring, and then we're waiting until summer.
So what I'll do before your public meeting is we'll refine a schedule that we're going to stick to.
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll get you out of schedule, and that way what you're relaying to the public is what they see. So I'll work with Nathan and Mike in the coming weeks to refine that schedule and talk about everything we're going to do, and then that's the schedule from here on out.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Anything else for Mike from anyone? You there?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Everybody surely appreciates you taking time and clarifying some things for us. So I appreciate it, and I hope you have a good day and make it back to the office.
Yeah, all right. I just pulled it in the garage. Timing was perfect. So, yeah, get back to me on the input for the public meeting, and then we'll keep moving.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
All right. Yep, thank you.
You bet. Well, I'll send him an email about maybe coming on the 30th. I seem too busy to really ask him to sit down and think about it. Let's see. Next steps, I guess. We are taking their advice and having an education event. I think that's a big thing. Keep the public informed on what we're doing and that we are working hard to find solid solutions to help clean up the lake. It doesn't come easy. It doesn't come fast or cheap. But once we get this model, I really think if we're patient and wait for it, we'll have a really good idea of what's coming in and what our expectations are to really get from that model and all the work that we do on the front end. So I guess with that being said, does anybody else?
one other agency that could affect your whole program, the government.
Well, they will affect the whole thing, so, and we're gonna,
I can tell you from experience, when we built the wastewater system for Mitchell, we couldn't even discharge distilled water into the James River and meet the government standards. So that's why you have an irrigation system. They've now changed the regulations. You can discharge water after it's been treated into the Jim River. But during the design phase, no. It was distilled water and they wouldn't approve that.
there's no doubt there's gonna be a lot of hurdles in this process. And we'll just have to work
Well,
through.
yeah, it took 100 years to develop.
Yeah, we can't fix it overnight.
Right.
Yes, sir.
I was just gonna say for your July 30th meeting, maybe come at it from the thought process of why should I come? Of what you're trying to design to show people. I mean, you know, I'm kind of at a loss as to who should come and why I should come. And so I think if you can say, here's what we're going to show you, here's what's, you know, Julie's been doing a great job of making these tests, and maybe she can explain some of that. I think, as I've said before, if you educate people, they're going to be a lot more amenable to wanting to be on your side. So I think just come at it from, why should I come? What's there going to be there for me to see? You know, why should I take my Sunday afternoon to come? Just that thought process of trying to design how you want it to look like.
Thank you. It's a great idea, so. Go ahead.
I would just suggest that when we're preparing our visuals for the 30th, that maybe we create one that defines our problem. You know, just something that says we've got an issue in the lake and it's a result of this 100 years of accumulation, an unusually large watershed, those things, you know, just something to maybe kick it off, defining what our problem is. And, you know, FIRO would probably be a pretty good resource to just give you like 1 or 2 or 3 bullets that would describe that. It wouldn't have to be, it could be very complex, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, if you just showed that graphic they had of the size of the watershed and the land use in the watershed, and just had a comment. I mean, I keep talking to people about the numbers they told us during that initial meeting, that at 40, the units don't matter, but at 40, water looks glorious. At 80, you start saying, the water doesn't look so great, and we're at 318. Just right there, those 3 numbers drive home the magnitude of the problem. So that and a visual of the watershed, I think, would show everybody this is a big problem that we're going to have to tackle. And it might sort of explain the solutions we use later, that it's the water coming into the lake that we're going to have to deal with primarily. I don't know, just...
Yeah, something to
You're
show
right,
where the nutrients is coming from.
Right.
Like they had a pretty good graphic when we were there that said there's X amount of nutrients coming from the watershed, X amount coming up from the bottom, and things like that. That's a lot of comments I get is a misconception of where that phosphorus is coming from.
The kids at the bottom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so write that in an email and send it to me, and I'll accumulate all these things, and we'll get them to Mike.
You need to fill in this graphic here
Sure.
to answer that question.
But we really, I don't know if we can.
I'm not sure that they'll be able to fill that out.
Yeah.
Because they don't know.
It's
They're
just
still
so,
building that
you know.
model. But maybe we could have a similar graphic to show where the phosphorus or the nutrient load is
Just
coming from.
general sources.
Where it's coming
Yeah.
from, so people can direct their attention to those.
Yeah, this would be pretty, could be difficult to really define where and how much. I mean, we could take the numbers off and just say, well, here's where they're coming from.
I have some additional material I can send as well.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got one I'm thinking of right now.
Yeah, so please, for me to keep track, I mean, look, I got some things to do. But I can only do so much, so I need the help from the committee to make sure we get the right information to Mike, so we can have, so it's worthwhile to come to this event.
I think you've done a great job.
Well, thank you.
It's the first time.
I appreciate it. We all do work really hard at this, no doubt. And we're all volunteers.
It's
And
the first time the public really got involved.
well, we all feel the same way. We're passionate about this, so
Yeah.
we got to do something. It's time. So,
I lived out there since 1960.
so let's just stay on this. We're going to have a good event, and we'll, like I said, it's very important for you to all send me ideas. So, anything else? We're going to try to get them there. That's all. I'm going to send an email to Mike about it. So, I would hope so.
When you get your publication materials, can you make sure that we get a copy too, and then we can upload them to the different social media, and we could probably even send it over to the chamber, and they could send it out to their mailing list too, their email list.
Let's try to wrap this up by midweek next week, okay? Just so we have, the article in the paper, and we have the stuff to Stephanie, and we are all on the same page of what we're really going to be doing there. So I think Mike brought up a good point. I try to identify who and why. That's, I think we probably skipped some of that stuff on the front end, but we'll get to it.
If you can volunteer in an area that you want to step up and kind of take the reins, that would be helpful to
Yeah, no
everybody
doubt.
as well.
So,
Another thing, I did do a recording of the meeting, so I will put a link to that on the Lake Mitchell Development Facebook page, as well as the website that we have for the FIRA Lake Management. And that way, if anyone wants to hear directly those comments that FIRA gave back to the questions, that'd be a good place to
Right.
direct them back to.
did we get any questions live?
No, I had
Okay.
10 people watching at one point, so.
We'll take it. All right. Anything else? Okay, so meeting we have to call to adjourn or anything like that, or are we just done?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? All right.